SingleDad took her to the clinic, then saw her face on a magazine cover. Jake Thompson wiped grease from his hands and checked the time again. 7:48 a.m. If he didn't leave in the next 2 minutes, he'd be late picking up Ava from early drop-off. She hated waiting, and she hated when he was late even more. 7 years old and already queen of punctuality. He tossed his wrench on the bench, grabbed his hoodie, and rushed toward the shop door, only to pause when he saw her. A woman sat slumped on the far end of the bus stop outside the garage. Thin sweater, pale face, one heel missing. She looked lost. Jake hesitated. His gut said to move on. He had a daughter waiting, but his heart said check. He walked out, approached slowly. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Her eyes flickered open, blue-gray, tired and startled. I think I need help," she whispered, almost embarrassed. He didn't ask questions. He opened his truck door and helped her inside carefully. She winced. He offered a water bottle and turned toward the clinic across town. He had no idea that this quiet act of kindness would flip his world upside down, and that the woman beside him was known in 1,000 countries by only her first name, Clara. The bus stop was nearly empty, bathed in pale morning light. A gust of wind stirred the fallen leaves on the sidewalk, and Jake was just about to pass it when he caught a glimpse of something out of place. Someone was slumped over on the bench, a woman. Her posture was wrong, limp, barely upright. One arm hung uselessly at her side. Jake slowed the truck. She wore a light sweater far too thin for the chill in the air. Her hair was tangled, the side of her face flushed with fever. One shoe was missing, and she looked like she hadn't eaten in days. For a split second, he hesitated. He had places to be. But then she swayed, and that tiny motion shattered his indecision. He pulled over. "Ma'am," he called gently, stepping out. She barely reacted. Her eyes blinked slowly, unfocused. I'm fine," she mumbled, but her voice was weak, unconvincing. "No, you're not," Jake said, kneeling beside her. "You're burning up. Can you stand?" She tried, failed. His instincts kicked in. "All right, we're going to a clinic. I'm not leaving you here like this." The woman didn't argue. Jake carefully helped her into the passenger seat of his truck, grabbing a worn blanket from the back and draping it over her shoulders. He glanced at her as he started the engine. Her head leaned back, eyes closed, lips pale. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But something deep inside told him this moment mattered, and he had no idea just how much. Chapter 3, The Clinic. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as Jake pushed through the clinic doors, carrying the woman's weight with one arm. A nurse at the front desk looked up in surprise. "Walk in." "She nearly collapsed at a bus stop," Jake said. Fever, disoriented. No-eyed, the nurse sprang into motion. Within seconds, they had her in a chair, a blanket around her shoulders, a thermometer under her tongue. Jake stood nearby, unsure if he should stay. Then she reached out barely and caught his sleeve. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was raspy but clear. "My name's Clara." He nodded, trying not to stare. Even sick, even pale, there was something striking about her. The sharp cheekbones, the haunted look behind her eyes, like someone used to hiding in plain sight. The nurse returned. "She needs fluids rest, but she'll be okay." Jake relaxed a little. "Can I leave my number?" "In case she needs a ride." Clara opened her eyes at that. "You've done enough already." She pulled something from the inside pocket of her sweater, a $100 bill folded and crumpled. "I'll settle this later," she told the nurse. "Promise." Before Jake could ask anything else, Clara gently waved him away. "Go take care of your daughter," she said, almost like she already knew. Jake lingered a second longer, then nodded. As he left, he looked back. She was already gonna vanish behind clinic curtains behind her silence. And in that moment, he didn't know he'd just helped one of the most recognizable faces in the world. He only knew her as Clara, and that she looked lonely. Later that evening, Jake sat on the worn couch, his daughter curled up beside him, still in her school uniform with crumbs on her cheeks. Ava looked up at him with those sharp, curious eyes that always saw more than she let on. "Who was the lady in your truck today?" she asked. Jake blinked surprised. "You saw her?" Ava nodded. She looked sad. He sighed and ran a hand over his face. "I don't know her name." "Well, just Clara. I found her at the bus stop. She was sick." Ava tilted her head. "So you just took her to the doctor, even though you didn't know her?" Jake met her eyes and smiled gently. "Yeah, I did." Why? There was a long pause. Outside, the streetlight buzzed. The heater rattled faintly in the vents. And somewhere in the kitchen, their old fridge hummed along with the quiet. Jake looked down at her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Because sometimes," he said softly, "kindness is the only thing we can give. And sometimes it's enough." Ava nodded slowly, like she was storing that sentence somewhere important. She rested her head against his side and whispered, "I hope she feels better." Jake didn't answer, but in his chest something quiet and warm unfolded. He didn't know who Clara really was, but for a fleeting moment, helping her had made the world feel a little less heavy. And in Ava's small, solemn eyes, he saw something that reminded him why he kept going. Grace. The grocery store was mostly empty, just the hum of coolers and the quiet shuffling of carts. Jake pushed his half-full basket toward the checkout, Ava skipping behind him with a box of cereal. "Can we get the one with the bear on it?" she asked, holding it up with hopeful eyes. Jake chuckled. "Only if the bear helps clean your room." She grinned and dropped it in the cart. As they reached the register, Jake grabbed a pack of gum and froze. Right there, stacked on the end cap rack of glossy magazines, was a face he knew, only now it wasn't pale or fevered or lost. It was stunning, fierce, dressed in gold. Clara, no Clara Hart. The headline screamed in sharp white font. "The face of Delacroix, Clara Hart returns to the spotlight." He stared disoriented. Same eyes, same mouth, same cheekbone shed clutched in pain just days ago. But this woman looked untouchable, like she belonged to another world. Jake picked up the magazine with shaking fingers, scanning the text. Fashion icon, heiress, vanished months ago after canceling a global campaign. Rumors of breakdown. Her father, Charles Hart, CEO of Delacroix Media. She was media royalty. His throat dried. Ava tugged his sleeve. "Dad, is something wrong?" He looked down at her, then back at the picture. She had no ID, no money. She sat on a sidewalk bench and thanked him with a whisper. And now she was on every newsstand. He swallowed. "No, sweetie," he murmured. "Nothing's wrong. I just didn't expect to see someone I know." Ava leaned over to peek. "Is that the sick lady?" Jake hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah," he whispered. "That's her." But she wasn't just someone in need. She was someone the whole world thought they knew. And Jake was starting to realize he never really knew her at all. That night, the magazine lay open on the kitchen table like a secret exposed. Jake sat across from it, untouched coffee going cold beside him. Clara Hart. The name didn't feel real, not compared to the woman who'd shivered beside him in the truck, who'd whispered thank you like she hadn't said the words in years. He traced the photo with his eyes, her face lit with makeup and flashbulbs, her spine tall in designer heels. But behind that glamour, he saw something else now. Fear. It had been there hiding just beneath the surface that morning. Not just illness, not just exhaustion. It was the kind of fear you don't learn from cameras or runways. It was the fear of being hunted or forgotten. Jake leaned back in his chair and hands on his face. Why had she been alone? Why no-eyed and why him? She could have walked into any hotel called any name, but she hadn't. She'd collapsed at a bus stop outside a rundown garage. She'd let him help her. Why he thought of Ava, how she said Clara looked sad. Kids always saw what adults tried to hide. Jake glanced out the window. Rain had started again, tapping gently on the glass like a question he couldn't answer. She was a woman with the world at her feet, and yet she'd looked more lost than anyone he'd ever known. It was nearly closing time when the bell above the garage door jingled. Jake looked up from under the hood of an old Chevy and wiped his hands on a rag. The last customer had already left. She stood just inside the door, same eyes, same posture, but this time she wasn't collapsed. She was steady, calm, different. Clara. Only now she wore a simple coat, her hair pulled back, no makeup, but her presence still filled the room. Jake stared for a long second. Wasn't expecting you. She smiled faintly, holding up a folded check. For the clinic, she said softly, and for your trouble. Jake shook his head immediately. I didn't do it for money. I know, she lowered the check. That's why I came back. A pause, then she tucked the paper back into her coat. I owed you more than a thank you, she continued. Most people see what I am. You saw what I needed. Jake leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. What was that? Clara glanced down, then looked up, eyes honest. To not be recognized. Just once. The quiet stretch between them, not awkward, just real. She sat on the edge of the stool beside a shelf of tools and rusted parts. For a while they didn't talk. Just the sound of a ticking clock and the creak of the wind against the door. Then she spoke again, gentler this time. That little girl of yours. She asked if I needed a blanket. Jake smiled. She's like that. Clara nodded. I haven't felt safe like that in a long time. She didn't leave right away. And Jake didn't ask her to, because sometimes silence was safer than words. And sometimes a return meant more than an arrival. Chapter 8, an afternoon together. The afternoon light spilled through the windows, warm and gold, the way late spring sometimes surprises you. Clara sat at the small kitchen table, a spoon in one hand and a smear of peanut butter on her cheek. Across from her, Ava was giggling uncontrollably. Jake standing at the stove, flipping pancakes for dinner, because why not just watch them smiling in disbelief? Clara Hart, laughing, not posing, not poised, just laughing. Earlier, Ava had dragged her out to the backyard to see a bird's nest, and Clara had knelt in the grass like it was made of silk. Then they picked dandelions and blew the seeds into the wind, Ava shouting wishes after each one. Now she was trying to teach Clara how to make her favorite pancake faces. Clara's attempt had resulted in a lopsided smile and one enormous chocolate chip eye. I think mine's haunted, Clara said, holding it up with a grin. Jake chuckled. I've seen worse on Halloween. She looked at him, still smiling, and for a flicker of a second there was peace in her eyes. Not the performance kind. The kind that slips in when you're not pretending anymore. You know what's strange? Clara said quietly as Ava chased the dog in circles. I haven't looked over my shoulder all day. Jake raised an eyebrow. Is that rare? She nodded. Unbelievably. They didn't say much more. The air didn't need filling. And as the sun lowered into the trees and Ava collapsed on the couch in a tangle of blankets and chocolate crumbs, Clara helped wash the dishes. No designer dress, no flash bulbs, just a woman. And for the first time in years, just a life she didn't want to run from. The moment was small. Clara stood outside Jake's garage, tying her hair up as the wind played with her scarf. She had just dropped off Ava's forgotten lunchbox, smiling as she handed it over like she belonged. Jake laughed not at her, but with her. The kind of laugh that meant you were starting to feel something again. She stepped closer, nudging his shoulder. Don't laugh at me. I survived 5 years of Paris runways. I can survive a mechanic's judgment. He smirked. You're wearing 2 different socks. Fashion, she said proudly. You wouldn't understand. They didn't see the flash. Not right away. Not until Clara stiffened so fast Jake turned around just in time to catch it, a black SUV pulling away, a long lens camera still pointed at them through the rear window. Her smile vanished. Jake's heart sank. Was that? Clara's voice was quiet, flat. They found me. By nightfall, it was everywhere. One headline read, Heiress on the Run. Clara Hart spotted laughing with unknown mechanic. Another garage man. Mystery, who is the single dad behind Clara's. Disappearance photos filled the gossip blogs. Jake's garage, his face blurred. Ava barely visible in the background. Jake stared at the screen, his stomach heavy, not with shame but with dread. By morning, Clara was gone. No note this time, no check, no knock on the door, just a folded scarf left on the back of the kitchen chair, and silence. Jake stood by the window that night, staring into the dark street. He hadn't just lost a visitor. He'd lost the quiet, the peace, the laughter over pancakes, and he wasn't sure if it would ever come back. It was just past 2 a.m. when Jake's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He jolted awake, heart pounding. His first thought was Ava, but she was curled beside him, breathing steadily, clutching her stuffed bear like always. The screen glowed with a number he didn't recognize. He hesitated, then answered. Jake, the voice was soft but unmistakable. It wrapped around him like smoke. Clara. A pause. I'm sorry to call so late, she said. I didn't know who else. I didn't know if I should. Jake sat up, pressing the phone closer. Are you okay? Another silence. Then, not really. His chest tightened. I thought I could go back to that world, to pretending, to smiling on cue and being someone they needed. But it doesn't feel like mine anymore. Jake swallowed, staring into the darkness of the room. The only sound was her breath, steady but fragile. Can I come back? She asked, almost a whisper. Just for a little while. He didn't need to think. Yes, he said quietly. You never really left. And though she didn't say another word, he could hear the sound of her exhale like the release of something held far too long. Outside, the wind stirred gently through the trees. And inside, for the first time in nights, Jake finally closed his eyes again, not to forget her, but waiting to see her come home. The rain came hard that night, thunder low and rolling windows speckled with streaks of water. Lightning flickered beyond the trees like camera flashes from another world. But inside the tiny kitchen, it was warm. Clara stood barefoot, sleeves rolled up, laughing as Ava smeared flour across the counter. Chocolate chip dough clung to their fingers. The oven ticked behind them, glowing faint orange. Jake leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching them. Clara wore one of Ava's aprons, pink with a unicorn on it, and her hair was pulled into a loose braid that Ava had insisted on doing herself. You missed a spot, Ava said, seriously pointing to Clara's cheek. Clara dipped a finger in dough and tapped it to Ava's nose instead. Giggling erupted, a lightness Jake hadn't heard in his house for years. This was the kind of night you don't plan for, the kind that just becomes memory. Clara looked up, caught Jake watching. She smiled, a quiet, grateful kind of smile. We're saving you 2 cookies, she said. Jake stepped closer still, not quite believing this was real. Not the cookies, not the laughter, not her. Just the simple, beautiful truth that someone like Clara, someone the world chased, was here. In his kitchen. Covered in flour, helping his daughter feel safe during a thunderstorm. And for the first time in a long time, Jake didn't feel like a single dad surviving. He felt like a man coming home. The rain had faded to a gentle whisper outside. Ava was asleep, curled in a nest of blankets, 1 cookie still in her hand. Clara sat across from Jake at the kitchen table, cradling a chipped mug of tea. Her hair was loose eyes, darker than he'd ever seen them. You deserve the truth, she said quietly. I owe you that. Jake said nothing, just listened. Clara took a breath, then another. I was 13 when I signed my first contract. My parents said it was for fun. Then it became the brand. My brand. Her fingers traced the rim of the mug, slow and tired. By 17, I was wearing diamonds I couldn't pronounce and lying in interviews about my perfect life. At 19, I stopped recognizing myself. She looked up. By 22, I had a breakdown on a balcony in Cannes. No one saw it, that was the rule. Smile. Be perfect. If you fall, fall quietly. Jake's hands clenched slightly in his lap. Clara noticed. I tried to quit. They said, take a vacation. I said no. They said, you're being dramatic. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. One day I slipped out a back door. I just left. No bag, no plan. Just me. Jake's voice was gentle. Why here? Clara looked toward the small hallway where Ava's soft breathing came through the cracked door. Because I wanted to feel small, she whispered. Not invisible, not famous, just small, safe. She met Jake's eyes, blinking back tears she'd clearly carried for years. And you let me, without asking for anything. Jake didn't say much. He just reached across the table, rough, calloused hand over hers. Not as a fan, not as a savior, just a man who'd seen someone broken and hadn't turned away. And in that stillness, Clara breathed easier, because sometimes the most powerful rescue isn't loud. It's quiet understanding. The headline dropped like a match into dry grass. Mechanics' hidden motive: single dad saved heiress, or trapped her. Jake stood frozen in front of the gas station newsstand, the magazine in his hand trembling just slightly. The cover showed a grainy, zoomed-in photo of him and Clara on the porch. She was laughing. The headline turned it into something ugly. Inside, it got worse. Sources say Clara Hart may have been manipulated during her time away. Experts question the relationship dynamics between a powerful heiress and a struggling single father. He didn't finish reading. At the garage that day, no customer showed up. A man drove slowly past, phone held high through the window. That night, Jake unplugged the landline. He didn't want Ava to hear any of it, but someone else had heard, and she didn't stay quiet. The interview aired 2 days later, live primetime. Clara sat alone on a white couch, no stylist, no stage. Just her, a mic, and the truth. The host asked carefully, Clara, what really happened during your disappearance? She exhaled and said calmly, I ran because I was drowning. A beat passed. The audience was silent. I ended up in a stranger's car, a mechanic, a father, a man who didn't know who I was and didn't care what I'd lost. He only saw that I needed help. She looked into the camera. Jake Mercer never asked for anything. He never once treated me like a headline. The host pressed, but do you understand the public concern, the power imbalance? Clara's expression didn't change, but her voice did. It trembled just enough. Power imbalance, she echoed. I had wealth, I had fame. He had nothing but kindness. Then her eyes softened, and the whole room seemed to lean in. He's the only person who saw me when I was invisible. And just like that, the narrative broke. Not because Clara had told the truth, but because she had done it without shame. And across the city, in a quiet garage kitchen, Jake watched the screen. Not with pride, not with fear, but with something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Hope. The suitcase stood by the door like a quiet goodbye. Clara looked different now, not because of her clothes or makeup, but because of the way she held herself. Still graceful, still poised, but there was something softer too, something real. Jake stood beside the kitchen table, arms crossed, trying not to show what he felt. Ava clung to Clara's side, frowning. You don't have to go. Clara knelt, brushing Ava's hair behind her ear. I do, sweetheart. Just for a little while. But it'll come back. Ava blinked. Promise. Clara glanced up at Jake, then back to Ava. It'll come back to people who want me, not just a world that needs me. Jake walked her to the door. The sun was just rising gold, spilling through the trees. For a moment, neither of them moved. Are you sure? He asked. She nodded. There are still parts of me I need to reclaim out there, but I didn't want to leave without giving you something. She reached into her coat pocket and placed a single silver key on the windowsill. Jake looked down at it, brows knitting. What's this? Clara smiled, that kind of smile that holds too many feelings for words. To the back door. In case I come back late. In case I come back at all. He stared at her, stunned. Clara. I'm not asking for a promise, she whispered. Just keep the key, if you want to. Then she leaned in and kissed his cheek, gentle, warm, familiar. When she stepped into the morning light, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. Because for the first time in her life, she was leaving something behind that felt like home. The garage smelled like oil dust and something baking in the apartment above. Jake wiped his hands on an old towel, trying to coax a stubborn engine back to life when he heard the unmistakable hum of a luxury engine. It didn't belong. He stepped outside just as the car door opened. She stepped out slowly, one sneaker hitting the pavement first. Jeans, white t-shirt, ponytail, no paparazzi, no entourage, just Clara. Jake's heart caught in his chest. "You came back," he said, voice barely above a whisper. She gave a lopsided grin. "Well, this beauty's been making a noise," she said, gesturing to the sleek silver car. "Thought I'd come to the only mechanic I trust," Jake smirked. "What kind of noise?" Clara stepped closer, her eyes locking with his. "The kind that sounds like missing something. Or someone." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of the things they hadn't said. She looked at the garage, the same cracked pavement, the cluttered workbench, the open bay door. And then at him. "I came for a tune-up," she said softly, voice catching just a little. Then added almost shyly, "and maybe something more." Jake didn't speak. He just stepped aside, held the door open. "Then you're right where you belong." As she walked past him, she brushed his hand gently. A small spark. A new beginning. And from the upstairs window, Ava watched them with a smile on her face, a drawing in her hand. It was the three of them, stick figures, holding hands, and above it in her crayon handwriting, "Home is not a place, it's people who stay."